If you watch my channel, you'll know that in one of the last videos I made, which was the top 5 favorite videos I've made of all time, I told you guys that Mitchell and I are going to do one car review every month for all of 2017 and hopefully beyond that. I also told you guys that the car we were going to be reviewing for this month was the Dodge Challenger Scat Pack. And behind me is a Dodge Challenger, but no, it is not the Scat Pack. It is not only a different trim, but also a different year than the model that we are going to review. But due to a scheduling conflict, we are now going to review that Scat Pack model next month.
So here we have the Challenger SXT. This is a V6 model. It comes with 305 horsepower and about 270 foot-pounds of torque. Now what's really cool about this engine, it's the Pentastar engine. That's when Dodge started making the more reliable V6 for these cars. And that means it's really, really strong. The engine block is very strong, so you can boost it if you want to. I've seen supercharger kits that can bring up to 430 wheel horsepower, and that's just plain with normal gasoline.
So today, we're gonna take a look at this car, which is the 6-cylinder, and tell you guys how much fun can you have in a 6-cylinder Challenger, and what benefits are there to the 6-cylinder as opposed to the 8-cylinder. Hope you guys enjoy.
So now we're in the Dodge Challenger. This is the V6 version, of course, because that doesn't sound like a V8. But still, with the V6, it is quite a punchy car. The weight does take a lot of that away, but you still feel it. You feel a lot more while you're rolling too. Like if I'm going 20, you can kind of feel the torque pulling, right? I drive this car a lot. This is my daily, so I'm gonna have some weird opinions on this. It's gonna be hard for me to really tell you a lot about it as a first impressions type of thing because I've been driving it for so long. But I also think that gives me a wider range of opinions about it, about things that you might not notice on a first impression basis. One of the things I really noticed, this is a great cruising car. I love taking this just through the city, around. Freeways are amazing with this. The one thing I do notice though, is that at lower speeds, the transmission is very clunky. The shifts can be hard and you really feel them, you get those jerks. It can be somewhat uncomfortable, but at higher speeds, everything tightens up. You get onto a freeway, you're going 80, and everything's just smooth, shifts are smooth. And when you're working through the gears, getting up to those speeds, as long as you're accelerating or going at a high speed, everything's fine. When you're kind of just cruising at a lower speed, like 20s and lower, everything gets kind of loose and clunky. And that's one of the things I really don't like about this car, other than the weight. And I think the weight has to do with that, because you kind of feel it, just everything shifts forwards and backwards, because the chassis of this car is very old and very heavy. Also, if you plan on getting this car, plan on getting better brakes. Because again, the weight, if you're going up and down hills, all of that shakiness was just from me braking. So if not getting better brakes, just make sure you replace them often. Also, this car has a lot of room inside. As a passenger, Oren, I'm sure you can attest to this, you have a shit ton of legroom.
Oh yeah. No, like, hey, when we drove to Vegas a little while back, we took this car, and despite the fact that it's a coupe, like, it was so comfy and so roomy for that really long road trip, which is something that you cannot say about my Infiniti G35 coupe.
And I think that trip was a perfect example of what this car is amazing for, and that is, like, I wouldn't say this is a road trip car, because you have SUVs and stuff like that have a lot more luxury for them, but taking this to Vegas, that was a 5-hour drive, almost like a 6-hour drive, right?
Yeah.
And the whole time we were just super comfortable. It was amazing. I never got uncomfortable in the seat. And the only other car I've driven for a long time was a Toyota Prius, and I can tell you right now, those seats are so uncomfortable on long drives. These just, they're not full bucket seats, so it's not like you're cramped inside them. They hold you and they're comfortable. They have lumbar support. You can adjust them electronically. It's no sticky leather on the seats. When it comes to the shiftable automatic, I'll let Oren talk about that one because it is more of a first impressions type of thing. Once you start using it, you get kind of used to it and there's nothing much to say about it. Another thing about this car that kind of annoys me is the air conditioning. I don't know if it just happened in this model, like in my car specifically, or if it's kind of a model-wide thing, but it doesn't work great. Once it gets going, it's either really hot or really cold, but you have to really crank it up. we have probably 7 different notches on the air conditioning knob, and you really have to get up to like 4 or 5 out of those 7 to feel anything. Otherwise, it's just kind of a trickle of air, and it takes a while for it to heat up or to cool off. And that's kind of annoying, especially if it's a cold morning, you want it to get warm quickly. It just doesn't happen very quickly. So now I'm gonna hand it off to Oren to get his first impressions of driving the car.
Okay, first thing that I noticed about driving the Dodge Challenger is that the visibility backing up is subpar. Like right here, because of like how the roof arches, there's a decent amount of a blind spot, and also the rear window, it's okay. It's alrightly sized. But right here there's a blind spot, which makes it kind of painful to back out of places. The brakes feel slightly numb. Like when I press them, I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of response. I feel like I'm just kind of stomping like a pedal that's placed on a pillow, that it just kind of like it goes in, but there's no like feedback as to how much I'm braking. That has to be the worst analogy that anybody has ever used ever. A pedal against a pillow. I feel really awkward doing this because Mitchell owns the car and he's sitting right next to me, so anything bad that I say is just like, screw you, Mitchell, your car sucks. Despite the fact that this car is really heavy, the engine provides a decent amount of power when you're just casually driving. Like setting off the line right there, I didn't feel the weight of the car. I didn't gun it or anything, I just casually pressed into the gas, but like the car felt potent. Despite the fact that it's a 6-cylinder, it didn't feel underpowered. There's also the same blind spot that's over here, over there, so when switching lanes it's kind of painful. You do feel the weight of the car when you're driving. Like as I was going around a corner right there and I turned the wheel, I kind of felt the car sway over. I think with stiffer suspension or coilovers or something like that, it would be fine. But for the stock suspension, this car does feel a lot like a boat. Let's go around this corner. Whee! Before I switch into Triptronic mode, let me explain why this car's Triptronic is a little bit different than anything you might be used to. In normal cars, how the Triptronic or the Mani-Matic or whatever you want to call it, how that works is you use the shifter and then you hit it over one direction and then up is up and down is down, or vice versa. But with this car, you put it into drive and then you go right and left for downshift and upshift. Ask me why. Ask me why they did that. I don't know. They just had to be different. Okay, 4th gear, 3rd gear. The power was all right. It wasn't mind-blowing. I think in my car, my Infiniti G35 Coupe at 4,000 RPM, I feel like I'm getting a lot more power in 2nd gear than I was in this car. This car felt like a gradual grow, as with the VQ35 in my car, it kind of feels more like a V6 where towards the end of the RPM lines you really gain a lot of power. But in this car, the shifts do feel smoother. In the Infiniti G35, which apparently is now my benchmark for comparing cars, in the Infiniti G35, when you downshift or upshift, it does feel like it doesn't have a lot of fine tuning, and so when you downshift or upshift, it's kind of like, oh, okay. And it'll like rock the car and it's not smooth. With this, when I just downshift, it shifted nicely. It didn't like, it kind of felt like it rev matched a little bit, which in my car it doesn't.
Just so you know, it doesn't rev match. I think you just got lucky.
Okay, 1st gear. I don't know if it's a lack of throttle response or just a lack of overall power, but revving out this car does not feel like you're gaining as much speed as you should be. Like, I'm gaining speed, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like powerful like my car. It definitely sounds faster than it is. Like the engine sounds like it's working harder than it actually feels. And that's probably true because of the weight in this car, that the engine is more powerful than I'm giving it credit for. It's just that this car, you know how much this car weighs?
It's, I think, 3,600.
3,600. The
plus body weight.
3,600 pounds curb weight of this car. That's a decent amount of weight. But to be fair, my Infiniti G35 is only 3,400 pounds. But let's stop comparing it to a random JDM car that I drive and instead compare it to something that's a little bit more applicable. The Dodge Hellcat that we drove, the Dodge Charger Hellcat, yes. that we drove. Compared to this car, the steering in the Hellcat, from what I can remember, was a lot more solid and responsive than in this car. In this car, it feels very loose and soft, while in the Hellcat, it did feel more fine-tuned and more responsive. Obviously, I don't even have to say it, the Hellcat was much more powerful at any gear in any RPM than this car. But I think it's time that I stop comparing this car to my Infiniti G35 Coupe or to the Hellcat. I think those are both two completely different cars, and I really should judge this car for what it is. And that is, like Mitchell described it, it's a cruiser. It's something that you just casually drive around. It's not a race car. It doesn't have the 8-cylinder. It's just a nice coupe that's just fun to, that's easy to drive. With that being said, the looser suspension that also causes it to be a boat is really nice on every road. Like, for example, if you're going over a bump, you really don't feel it. The seats are very loose and very comfortable, like Mitchell described it. They're not gripping me, which for long drives and casual drives is very nice. And there is a lot of room around me, so I do not feel cramped at all. The buttons do feel really solid. For example, the ones on the steering wheel and the air conditioning and stuff like that, they all do feel refined and not loose like how I imagine the American car to be. Regarding the feel of the materials around me, this is one of the more base models. Like, I'm pretty sure before Mitchell bought this, this was a rental car, right? So this was pretty low end on the model line, but at the same time, this rubbery kind of not hard plastic feel on the lining is very nice. Next to the shifter, the plastic around it is a little bit harder and a little bit more plasticky. And so is this mock carbon fiber, not carbon fiber trim that goes around the stereo. What would you call this, Mitchell?
Shit. A lot of owners switch this out.
Really?
For something else, yeah. I don't even think it's supposed to be like carbon fiber because it doesn't look like
no, it doesn't look like carbon fiber. And like, it's easy to make a mock carbon fiber with plastic.
Yeah.
Like, so it's telling me that I'm driving eco-friendly right now. Mitchell, didn't you say that how this car works is it drives in 4 cylinders unless you gun it, then it goes to 6?
While you're driving casually, it will only run on 4 cylinders, and that's when the eco light turns on. If you put the throttle down, I think more than like 30 or 40%, or it's like 20 or 30%, something like that, it will then go into 6 cylinders and you'll have the full power.
I'm a guy who likes options. I like to have the option to turn that feature on and off. I like the option to configure a car that I'm buying and stuff like that. So with this kind of forced fuel efficiency, I'm not a huge fan of it. I would much rather prefer a button with like a little green leaf on it that I could click and then it's like, bam, now you're an eco-friendly. But having to shift between the 6 cylinders and the 4 cylinders, I would rather be able to tell the car to do that myself. I don't really get what they were going for with the gauges in front of me. They are all white with like red and black or gray, red and gray trim. And I kind of feel like it doesn't match the rest of the car. I really feel like one thing that this car needs is a better just interior design all around. Like Mitchell was saying that this color around the radio that we were just talking about, it's something that people switch out often because it just looks kind of weird. And overall, I think like the colors don't really blend well in this car, and I feel like a better interior design would do a lot for this car. The buttons themselves, like the quality of the interior is fine, but the actual design of it needs a little bit of work. Whenever you brake or speed up in this car, everything shifts because the car weighs so much that the weight is just moving around, and so everything in it just moves. Like, I was just braking there, and the owner's manual of the car, I could hear it sliding in the glove box. Another nice feature of this car is there are the cliche dangling dice on the mirror. It adds a lot of retro feel to the car. Slightly makes the entire interior design a lot nicer than it was in the beginning. Okay, last attempt. I think it's just a combination of a couple factors, being the throttle is not very responsive when you touch it, and also as you go through the press of the throttle, and also the engine does not have enough power to suffice for the weight of the car. Just overall, if you're looking for a fast car, or even something that you would categorize as like a lot of fun, you really should opt for the V8. You shouldn't settle for the V6. But when it comes to like a cruising car, I think this really does fit that caption. So I think that's it for getting my opinion of this car. Now it's time to make our conclusion. So we'll see you guys then. So now it's time to conclude our review of the SXT Challenger. Once again, this is the V6, in case we didn't say it a million times before this. In my opinion, this car did have a lot of positives, but also a lot of drawbacks. This car was a very good cruiser. It was very comfy inside. There was a lot of room in the front and back seats, despite the fact that it's a coupe, but also it was very heavy and did not have enough power to make up for the fact that it was so heavy.
When I look at this car, I kind of look at it, you have to think about it as its own entity. You can't really compare it to other sports cars because it is very unique in that style. Maybe you can compare it to some of the other muscle cars like the Camaro and the Mustang, but it is very unique in its style.
So like we were trying to do inside the car, I was comparing it to my Infiniti G35 Coupe, but the thing is, it's not that car. It's way more roomy, it's way more built to be a cruiser, like I said, that it is not like any of the other cars we've reviewed before this. So obviously if you're looking at this car, you're probably also looking at other cars like the Camaro and the Mustang. And we are going to get our hands on a Mustang somewhat soon to review, but we really cannot tell you our opinions on this car as opposed to those other ones. What we can tell you is our opinion on this car overall. So that brings us to our rating system, which we've used before, but if you're not familiar with it, we'll tell you about it. So there's 5 tiers: fun, performance, bang for your buck, quality, and then an overall rating. And all of these are out of 5. So first, we're gonna start with fun.
Fun, we gave it a 3. It is, again, a rather underpowered car, but once you learn how to drive it and learn how to deal with the weight, it is a lot of fun to drive.
So it's not anything like the Miata, and if you're looking for a fun car, this may not be the one for you. But that being said, it's by no means boring, so we're gonna give it a strong 3. Next is gonna be performance.
For performance, we gave it a strong 2.5. Again, the weight inhibits its abilities a lot. The engine is a great engine. It has a lot of potential, but as it comes stock, it's not that good.
So for performance, it's not that highly rated, but again, like we've said, it is more of a cruising car than a performance car. So next, we're gonna talk about bang for your buck.
Bang for your buck, this is a pretty mid-range car. It's for the year I got it, it was a 2012, I got it for around $17,000, and that was pretty low for this. Bang for your buck, if you're buying it for what we've been talking about, cruising, but you still have the potential of fun, we gave it a 3. The interior could use some work, but the potential of this car is very great.
Next is quality.
Quality, we gave it a 3.5. Again, the quality could use some work, but there were some things that we were very surprised about, like the dashboard and some of the interior that really surprised us when it came to driving potential.
For example, some of the buttons, though the interior does need some work like we said, the buttons did feel very strong, and overall the car does pose as a very reliable object, so we give it a 3 just because it has a mix of interior quality was mediocre, but the actual buttons themselves were pretty nice. Finally, this leads us to overall.
Overall, it gets a 3. As you saw with all the others, everything, you gotta kind of take it as a package. Everything put together, it takes a 3 in the overall rating.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys have any suggestions for any cars that you want us to review, make sure you leave it in the comments below and we'll try to get our hands on one. Make sure you subscribe to both of our channels. Follow us both on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. We'll see you guys next time.